Hello, welcome to this August 5th, 2026 meeting of the Review of Multiple Member Bodies Committee. I am Chris Dorn. I use he, him pronouns. I'll be chairing this evening. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting is being conducted by a remote participation. We will post audio recording, audio video, transcript, and other records of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. With that, if I could ask lacking a staff liaison, I will call the roll myself to bring us to order. So Courtney Henderson.
Here.
Brandon Broderick.
Present.
Derek Rice.
Here.
Jesse Klingon. Do not see Jesse Klingon. I'm Chris Dwan. I'm also here with 4 people present and 1 absent. We have quorum and we can begin. So I will share the agenda. And so first up, our first item is administrative items. Does anyone have anything for committee logistics and standards? I have one quick one, which is that I have developed a conflict at the date of our next meeting. I can work that out. Given that Councillor Klingon is not here, we probably can't do a scheduling live, but I will work that out with Mr. Salisbury, and either you can proceed without me and Mr. Rice can chair, or we can reschedule that. Okay. Hearing no administrative items. All right. I would also share, just as for the record, in case people are curious about our proceedings here, I wanted to show for the recording how to get these materials. You go to somervillema.gov, go to the government tab, get down to agendas, minutes, and more, which is one of my favorite links. And then I always just pick a word that is unique. In this case, it is multiple. And you can see we have had 4 meetings so far. This is the 5th, and the meeting documents, the agenda is here. For prior meetings, this is where the video recording, any presentations that there were. We do not yet have minutes for that one up, but we have minutes from prior, and I see that the scope and approach has made its way onto the website. So if people are curious about our prior workings, it is on the city website. Clerk Henderson, do we have anybody in the audience?
Yes, we do. We have 3 attendees.
All right. I like to acknowledge the audience, and if folks are interested in sharing your name and what brings you to the meeting this evening briefly, I welcome that, and you are absolutely not obligated. If you would prefer to just listen, that is also absolutely welcome. Please indicate with the raise hand button if you would like to introduce yourself.
Mr. Chair, we have 2 members of the community looking to speak. I have Elsie Best first.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Elise Best. I am a resident of Somerville Ward 3, and I am co-chair of the Human Rights Commission of Somerville. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Holly's hand was up, but I see that it has been lowered.
All right. Generally,
The hand is, sorry to interrupt, the hand is back. So.
Oh.
Hi, sorry about that. I figured when you mentioned that I had raised my hand, it was time to take it down. Through you, Chair, to your members, my name is Holly Simeoni. I'm a lifelong resident of Ward 4. I serve as the chair of the Somerville Disabilities Commission. I am here as a resident, very interested in the work that you're doing. And thank you all for being part of this process.
Thank you for being here. All right. Please, if there is something that I don't intend to make this a complete free form, but if there's something that you feel like you can make, if anybody feels like you can make a positive impact by speaking up, please raise the hand. We are not terrifically formal here. We don't use the through the chair. We address each other by first name. If we need to, we can collapse to more formality, but that's the way we've been running, and that's been working out okay so far. So I would then go back to the agenda here. And committee members, we saw a public comment by 2 residents. I think they kind of speak for themselves. So my preference would be to let those be inputs to us rather than having too much of a conversation about them. Mr. Rice.
Yeah, I would just like to acknowledge for the record and just so that everyone knows that we see this and I think can be corrected. Unless I'm misunderstanding something, I don't see these attached to our meeting. So while we have them, thanks for liaison forwarding them to us when they arrived. I don't know that the public has access to them.
That is accurate. And my understanding is that we are in the depths of summer and we're down staff for vacation and various reasons. And so it's just kind of a long queue to get these documents online. I'm certain that they will be online over time, but right now you are correct. We have the public at a disadvantage because they were not attached to the meeting. Anything else on those? All right, my preference would be, and I'm open to conversation on this, my preference would be to go through the new business first, the unfinished business of these committees that we opened up. I don't feel particularly ready to dig in on how to deal with them this evening. If anybody wants to talk about the 6 that we opened up last time we met, I'm open to it, but I feel like there's more conversation to be had before I really understand what, if any, recommendation we could make on these, especially with both our legislative liaison and Councillor Klingon absent.
I have no strong opinion either way. So however you would like to start, I think will be fine.
These were, I included these on an earlier agenda to get them in front of us, start the conversation, kind of force us all to clarify our thinking. And for my part, I'm not done considering and talking to people about them yet. So moving to, I guess, although let's move to the new business and then we will see where we wind up in terms of time. So I would like to take each of these in section 5, the possible retention of affordable housing, community preservation, conservation commission, election commissioners, condo review, historic preservation, memorialization, and urban forestry. I would like to take them one at a time. Starting off with, I have done my thing again. It didn't make its way to the website yet, but I have updated this document that I've been making for my own notes. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is the first one we would talk about. This is one where it is defined under Mass General Law. The city can choose to adopt it and have an Affordable Housing Trust Fund board. The enabling law is linked here, and then the ordinance specifies number of seats and a few other things. It has a website that describes its working. It's 5 to 9 members. The term seems to be indefinite. There does not seem to be any limitation on how long people can serve. And then they meet on the 2nd Thursday of the month, and they have staff support from the housing division. And I found it useful in my thinking to go to that website and just take a look at the functionality of this body. And what we have here is it's been around since 1989. We have a trust fund to create affordable rental home ownership units in Somerville. The job of this body is to manage that fund. And as I look through, they have very regular meetings, which as I go back, they've got all sorts of documents in them with financial reports. And then it's even, in some cases more current than ours. This looks to me like a body that meets regularly, dispenses funds, and is functioning as intended. Does my take at what is unfortunately necessarily a superficial look is that this is one where we could very easily just say to retain it. Opening it up to that's my take. Opening it up to the broader group. What do you folks think?
Yeah, they do meet pretty regularly. I know that they are doing reports as well. I'm trying to remember, there was something that they've done recently that's pretty significant. So I think your opinion on that, on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund makes sense to me. I'm trying to see what it was that they did recently.
Go ahead, Mr. Rice.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm trying for remember what the language was that we were using, but there were like advisory, and like was it adjudicating and quasi-adjudicating? What was the term? Just so I'm using the language correctly.
Go ahead, Brenna. I'm assuming you had an answer to that.
My recollection, and this may be from a different conversation, but I believe that the two terms were working group versus advisory group, or working versus advisory, although this group would qualify as adjudicatory as well.
Yeah.
But the adjudicatory term is usually used to decide whether or not a body goes to city council for appointment approval.
As I understood that, there's whether the board members need to be confirmed by the city council, but then there's also whether the decisions of the body are directly impactful, versus whether they are purely advisory, like us, for example. Our decisions here will be in the form of a recommendation that has literally no power until the city council takes it up. Where I believe the Affordable Housing Trust Fund presents budgets and recommendations that much more directly manages funds.
Great. So yeah, I was asking about the terminology, but if through clarification, we also answered the question that was going to follow, which is just to understand. So we believe that this body is one of like, I will use my own language here, like some actual formal power rather than merely speech.
Yes, that's exactly right. And just at a high level, my impression is that the city triages and applies resources to the bodies that have actual decision-making power in that way. As I have gone through all of the websites and minutes and agendas for most of these committees and commissions, the ones where like dollars go out the door tend to be pretty up to date. And others where there is less direct power, sometimes it's harder to find current materials. All right. Other thoughts about this committee? I want to take these up individually. So I would suggest, does anybody else have anything to say about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board? Go ahead, Brenna.
Just for clarification, the question on the table is purely about retention or
Yes.
conversation otherwise. I see no reason has been presented to us by staff or board members to present an inclination that this board should not be retained.
Right, then since we're down a person, I will move that we recommend in a preliminary recommendation that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board be retained.
I'll second that motion. I believe that's required in an order. Is that correct,
I
Mr. Chair?
believe, I'm not sure we need seconds, but they're always welcome.
All right.
So with that, I'll call the roll. Jesse Klingon, absent. Courtney Henderson,
Yes.
Derek Rice,
Yes.
Brenna Broderick,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. So we have a recommendation for favor. And I'm just making a note. Yes, one absent. Cool. All right, that is one. Moving on to the Community Preservation Committee. So this one is weird. This is the old one. Let me bring forth my new one. Stop share, because this one I think we might have a little bit more conversation on. Scrolling through. Community Preservation Committee. This one is also framed up by Mass General Law. They make this an optional thing that the city can adopt. We have some ordinance that fleshes out and enlightens it. They have, similar to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, this manages the allocation of Community Preservation Act funds. So these are the percentage that I'm blanking on that we have collectively voted to raise from ourselves for things within the community. This group is tasked with preparing a budget, reviewing proposals, and making recommendations to the city council. They are a 9-member body with a structure that I think will be informative for other conversations. This is in the ordinance specifies that there's 1 member apiece from Planning, Conservation Commission, Historical Commission, Parks and Open Space, and the Housing Authority, plus 4 members of the public. So 4 members of the committee. We do have these bodies that explicitly include membership from other bodies, which I think could be useful in the future. They have a 2-year term. They can have up to 2 of those in a row. They meet monthly, and they're staffed out of strategic planning and community development. And then going again out to their page. I wish I had a whole screen that I could share so I didn't have to go back and forth like this, but I have one big monitor. Their page is under CPA, and again, it is robust. There is a phone number you can call, and as you look to the committee, we have committee members. As with the other one, their minutes are robust and up to date, and they're dispensing millions of dollars per year. I think they look great and effective. Does anybody else have thoughts or experience or insight that would lead to anything other than just retaining this one?
I have a question, just further information gathering. The funds that this committee administrates or over which they make recommendations, those are community benefit agreement funds, like they come from developments and those sorts of things. Is that the same thing, or am I conflating this with something else?
This is another thing. This is the tax surcharge. Yeah, a 1.5. I thought we changed this to 3. Anyway, it's a surcharge on property taxes minus the tax on the first $100,000 of property value. So it comes in as tax revenue. from property owners. And then that gets distributed out, usually a lot to the creation of affordable housing, and then some to other projects that have been applied for. Brenna.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add on to that, CPA funds oftentimes go to like historic preservation, um, other types of like general community enrichment applications, although a good portion do go towards the Affordable Housing Trust.
And do you recall whether that would have been a ballot measure? And I think this might just be a lag that I think we put it up to 3.
I Three does sound very familiar. I would need to like check before going on the record, but I do believe it was increased in the last few years.
I think I may be one of the only people to go this exhaustively on the city webpage. And so I have a habit of just emailing the web team and saying there's a number that's off or there's a thing that's misspelled. So
I think for that as I continue to understand to what degree hairs are separate or get split, there are these bodies that we were talking about that are merely have the power of their speech, and bodies that have more direct power. And I'm seeing some sort of middle ground here where this is a body that makes recommendations which must be either approved or vetoed, right? So it's like there's definitely the decision has to start with them, but they can be overruled. This doesn't affect, in my thinking, what recommendations we might make about this body, but for the broader conversation and understanding of the different types of multi-member bodies, I'm trying to continue to internally come to some sort of model of these various distinctions. I'm curious from others' knowledge and research here if they're seeing this the same way.
yeah, that's aligned with how I see it, that this is not the licensing commission that we have no say over anyways, this committee. We have to have one of those. But the license commission is actually issues licensees. This body makes big, complex, fairly binding recommendations, and other bodies make less binding, more sort of directional recommendations. But yeah, I agree that that's an important lens to look at these through. Go ahead, Brenna.
Yeah, I would agree with how that's been laid out. In my mind, I sort of think of it as advisory versus working, and then within working groups, there's those that submit recommendations and those that work directly. So it's sort of like an indirect versus direct. I think that the community preservation, this body is pretty firmly in my mind as like a working body, more that like their recommendations are not advisory. They are uh very productive in their review of the CPA fund applications. So they're pretty firmly in my mind as a working group, but I think within working groups there is a delineation of like direct versus indirect.
Go ahead, Derek.
I'm wondering if your delineation of advisory and working bodies would fall exactly the same as a delineation of like the types of decisions made within the local government and needing, if tracking those decisions back to where they came from. Does a body's work sort of count as substantive deliberation impactful to the community, right? So, for example, if I were to imagine that I'm a community member and I either took issue with or were merely curious about a decision about how community preservation funds were being used, and I wanted to sort of understand the provenance of a decision, I would certainly care about the deliberations of this body, right? Whereas perhaps if I use our own body as a sort of foil to the example of this, if multi-member bodies were restructured, that would largely be a decision of city council and the executive based on a written report. But I think it's a further leap to try to really dig in and understand, like, well, where did that written report come from? Because a report sort of is itself that's the only thing that maybe matters in the end.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction because our report is going to be a standalone thing, kind of human readable and hopefully well referenced and stuff. And yeah, if somebody wanted to see where a certain paragraph came from, they could go back and watch our 24 hours of meeting, where I would be if I were, if I thought that there was some skullduggery going on in the Community Preservation Act, and I thought somebody getting money who shouldn't, you know. I might really dig in. I don't think that at all. I think that's a kind of a wild idea. But yeah, your point is well taken that this is one where they're very directly, it still has to be approved by the city council, but like with the Affordable Housing Trust Board, you know, decent amounts of money are changing hands related to property improvements. And so this is one where that openness is pretty important. Anything else to say about this? I feel like this one's another, for me at least, there's no reason to not retain it. All right, then I would move that we recommend retention of the Community Preservation Fund Board. Courtney Henderson.
Yes.
Brenna Broderick.
Yes.
Derek Rice.
Yes.
And Jesse Klingon, absent. So 4 yes, 1 absent. That one also is recommended to retain. Back to my agenda. Next is Conservation Commission. So Concom is the first one we will take up this. So I had a PDF of that, but doing it live. All right, Conservation Commission this is a body that promotes and develops the natural resources and protects the watershed of the city. They research the city's land, they coordinate the activities of unofficial bodies for similar purposes, and they oversee the city's community garden program. This is an optional body under Mass General Law. We adopted it. I have the years up top, but I will spare you the scrolling. There's no additional ordinance language that refines it from the Mass law. There's between 3 and 7 members under state law. They currently have 7. The terms are 3 years. They meet monthly and they're supported by public space and urban forestry. I'll bounce over to their website. So we have 7 members. What my only question on this one, like I reached out to Mr. Drayton to ask about the Conservation Commission. He is on vacation. On their website, they have the open space and community gardens thing. I have a plot in a community garden, and I learned about this commission through my work on this committee. I was unaware that they were involved in running it. I thought that was all public space and urban forestry. And when I went and I looked for their meetings, it was light. That I see evidence of meetings, and there are agendas, but the minutes just don't get updated. There's video recording. They do seem to meet twice a month, and going into agendas, they do talk about various items. There's a resident comment. There's snow disposal. There's the Mystic Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge. So for me, and I did go deeper than this in my own research. It had an annual meeting on community gardens. They make materials. I was not as just blown away on the face of it by their record of impactful decisions and work that's going on in this committee. fact that minutes don't come out makes me curious. Um, and it seems like mostly they're talking about community garden and occasionally about other projects, which makes me wonder what is the sort of direct guiding benefit to the city, especially given that there's another committee that also advises public space and public space and urban forestry on planting standards and trees. They seem to have a strong overlap. So I'm divided on this one, on whether to recommend retention or merging, or to kick it down the road and wait until the staff member is back, and have more conversation. I saw Brenna's hand first.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that this sounds like a body that we would benefit from learning more about, either from a member of PSOF or from Malik, the liaison himself.
Mhm.
From like hearing, like either asking them for them to come and present to us to discuss the work. I am apprehensive of using the posting of the minutes as any sort of metric for our deliberation, just because that falls more along the operational side of things of like procedural operations and administrative operations, and that's led by the liaison. So I think that that's just like perhaps at the edge of our scope. And we would want to like focus more of our efforts on like the content of their work and the content of their ordinance. So before, I would feel comfortable like before taking any vote of or even having really a deliberation of retention or merging, to hear directly from the liaison, to kind of like give some more information about about the commission so that we can better understand their work.
Derek.
Yeah, overall, I agree with the sentiment. Learn more. Um, I think there are other small indicators that themselves do not like rationalize a particular decision, but that draw my attention. One of which is that I think this body was created through an adoption of MGL that we did in 1972, which is not to say all decisions from 1972 were dated, but they are certainly more likely to be dated. I also note that unlike some other bodies that are MGL with adoption, we do not have further defining ordinance. So MGL says this body may be 327. We do not have an ordinance that nails that down more narrowly, which is inconsistent with other bodies that are MGL with adoption. Not unique, I believe, but less common.
Yeah.
So if we don't my thinking is that if we should learn more. But if we find that we recommend retaining, I would, with the limited information I have now, I would likely have an appetite to recommend making sure that we sort of revisit and consider further defining the ordinance. I'm not making any such suggestion now, just conversation.
Go ahead, Brenna.
Sorry, just a point of clarification, for Mr. Rice, Derek. I keep forgetting how we are addressing each other. Um, when you say further defining the ordinance, do you mean creating an ordinance like an administrative code? Just as we wouldn't, I don't think we have the opportunity to like further define MGL as we adopt it. But if we don't have anything in the city code of ordinances or in the administrative code, that might be an opportunity to like recommend that something is drafted.
Yeah, so I'm unsure I understand the distinction you're drawing, so I'll just try to clarify the position I was trying to say. So we also just talked about the Community Preservation Committee, for example. So that has an MGL with adoption, but it also has an ordinance in the Somerville Code of Ordinance. that begins with there's hereby established a community preservation committee pursuant to MGL, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and like it gets more precise than the full boundaries that the MGL allow. It narrows down to more specifics of how we are using it, right? So certainly MGL defines the outer bounds, but I believe our ordinances define sort of like the inner bounds. So MGL says for, yeah, I won't. That's my thinking, and I may be incorrect because I'm going on memory alone. But my broad sweep research across all of these bodies was that the MGL with adoption is often paired with local ordinances that further define the body. Veterans Commission, Affordable Housing Trust,
Mhm.
Community Preservation, Council on Aging. Not all of them. There's a fair number that are just MGL and no further. It might be a 50-50 or close to it. Anyway.
It's 50-50 as I looked at it. And your point about 1972 is valid. I flashed up that wall of text that is MGL Chapter 40, Section 8C. And it's got all kinds of stuff about towns and cities that are not Somerville's form of government. It has that's broad boundary. So yeah, I think it's very reasonable we could request that the staff that Mr. Drayton either um, talk to talk to us beforehand or come here. I hesitate to put anything else on staff in terms of presentation. I hesitate to put too many presentations in this committee. But let's gather more information on this particular body. Just find out, I totally agree with the point about the absence of minutes on a particular web page does not mean that there's an absence of work being done. It doesn't indicate the absence of value. It just, as we said at the very beginning of the meeting, it's sometimes kind of a long road to having a PDF all the way on the web page. So any objections to leaving that one in our unfinished work? Derek?
Sorry, no objection. Some like live questions to maybe like take note of as we consider asking for more information. The MGL goes on at length about a conservation and passive outdoor recreation plan that is essentially maintained by this commission. I am curious if we have such a thing. It also talks about what the thing that jumped out at me was it talks about taking by eminent domain. Do we need to have this body in order to use that mechanism? Like that would be very impactful if we accidentally got rid of a body because the body doesn't do a whole lot, but the body is essential to do this one specific municipal power that we care about. Yeah, I think that's where I'll leave it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brenna.
Yeah, just building off of what Derek said, it's just reminding me of a thought that I know part of the directive or part of the rationale that's guiding our directive about considering dissolution versus retention is that we have so many bodies, and bodies require staff and time and procedural effort, and various levels of like staff time on appointments and managing minutes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so by reducing the number of bodies as is appropriate, it like allows for more focused use of staff time. I think one of the things that would be good to hear from either someone in PSAF or from Malik as a liaison is like, what is the level of like what is the capacity and bandwidth, and like what is the level of requirement of the of Concom? Essentially, like hear from them like, is this something that requires a solution? Like, is there a problem that requires a solution here? Or are we just looking to dissolve something that is not actually exhausting resources? Just like something I would like to bring to them, because I know that that's part of the guiding rationale behind like why we are approaching conversations of dissolution versus retention is like, is this an adequate use of resources? And so before we answer that question, I think we should ask the liaisons exactly about the use of resources that that we're looking at with Concom.
Yeah, completely agreed. And my and just to say again, these are my notes. It helps me to write things down to figure out what I think. I'm trying to strike a balance between showing my work and overly steering everybody else's thinking because this has to be like it has to be a collective effort. But this came from the conversation with Brandon where he approaches legislation saying, is there a problem that we're trying to solve? And then is a committee or commission an effective way to address that problem? You know, is it practical in the real world? Like, do we have enough people in PSOF to have it, and then is it legal and is it equitable? Um, I it seems like I actually kind of stumble on the necessity of the body. Like I will go back through and read this wall of text on the state page to see what problem we're trying to solve. And then I'm super interested to hear from the staff member, and I'll reach out also to committee members to say, what problem are we solving with this work and is it effective? Right. Anything else on Concom before we move on? I'm liking the way we can triage down here and sort of decide because we didn't need to have reports or presentations on affordable housing or community preservation. All right, Board of Election Commissioners is next. So, a Board of Election Commissioners is ancient, by the way. It came in 1928. I believe it is the oldest one I think it's the oldest one that I found. Those are required. Board of Election Commissioners, they oversee the conduct of elections. They're in our charter, and there's four. This is a weird one. There are 2 members from each of the leading political parties. It being an election season, I am keenly aware of the parties right now. So we have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, I assume. It's a 3-year term. I read over and over in the charter about it's unclear to me whether they get the boot when a mayoral term turns over, or whether they're just contemporaneous, like their terms start and end on January 1, like the mayor. Go ahead, Brenna.
I do not believe that their term ends when a mayor's term ends, just because I know that there's currently 1 vacancy on this board that we are making efforts to fill at the moment. There's a vacancy posted, or if there isn't, then there should be like at the end of this week. It's something that's currently being worked on. So my understanding is if they did end with the mayoral term, we would have 4 vacancies that we'd be trying to fill. So I don't, just from where I'm sitting, I don't see any reason that that's the case.
Okay. Their webpage is light. However, I talked to Mr. Salerno from time to time, and everybody he has a job, he does that job, and I've never heard a word said bad about this commission. I also don't have a tremendous amount of experience with it, except for the observation that our elections run pretty well, so far as I can tell. Go ahead, Mr. Rice.
I will admit to not knowing much about the existence of this commission. I certainly know about the elections department, and I know that they do a lot of hard work, which also is, I believe, Director Salerno is director of the elections department, and that is the means by which he is also a member of this commission. I'm unsure what work the commission does. And I'd like to better understand that. And a thing that I will say, and I will flag up front that is unclear to me whether it is in our scope, and I do not expect to be convinced one way or the other in this conversation. But there's a stipend for these positions.
Hmm.
There are not stipends from very many multi-member bodies. And if there are going to be stipends, they need to be placed commensurate with either expertise or labor or value or something. And so I don't know if the issue of stipend, because I think it's in the ordinances, so it's anyway, I don't know if that's in our scope, but I would be curious to better understand, regardless, I'd be curious to better understand what work this commission does as distinct from what the elections department does.
Yeah, I have pulled up their minutes from their last meeting, and it seems to be an after action report about the last elections that were held. Go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I actually was just going to agree with Derek, less in the context of this specific body, but more in general. I think that it would be a really valuable area of focus for us in our recommendations to, like, I think that I'm guessing just from our conversation so far that part of our recommendations will include conversation about advisory versus working groups and like uh, ways that our bodies can sort of be codified along those lines. But I also think that it would be valuable to produce some recommendations around the like standardization of stipends and what like qualifications go into determining the bodies that receive stipends. I'm sure that is um, like there is a rationale behind which bodies receive them, but I think it would be valuable for that to be something that we examine, just examining all bodies and those that receive stipends and like how those stipends are decided. So this is not really within the context of the Elections Commission, which I know from conversation that part of their responsibilities are like verifying election results. I think that beyond that, it may be valuable to hear from uh, Commissioner Salerno. I'm not sure if he's a Commissioner Salerno or Director Salerno. It may be valuable to hear from him, but I also don't see any inclination that would sway me towards not retaining this body. Um, and I think before further deliberation, I would just really would love to hear from the body, from a member of the body themselves.
Yeah, I've pulled up and I completely agree. It's these ones where it is unclear. Like doing a good job here means getting more information before we just willy-nilly vote. Um, but yeah, it seems on the top, on the face of it, to have a semi-independent body reviewing elections seems like a good thing for democracy. Your point is very, very well taken about why these are compensated and not others. I haven't been able to find a record of why that would be that way. And it seems like they prepare an annual register containing the names of all qualified voters. I am curious to know, like what this does not say is that our commissioner of elections, the full-time staff member, is on this committee by default. Like it's interesting. There's some conversation to be had. I'm curious why it is that way. All right, so we're going to ask. I will reach out also through Brandon to Mr. Salerno and try to learn more. I also did note that as I dug in, they don't seem to at least have had their meetings on the website very regularly. Um, again, all that says is that they're not on the website, but like if I'm going to make the observation that there aren't minutes for the Conservation Commission, I have to make the same observation here. And there's this gap of 5 years that I'm curious, especially if they got paid during that time. Like, I'm curious where the minutes are. But so it seems like we're going to kick that one down the road as well. All right, so back to Acrobat, back to share. All right, we're halfway through the list and less than halfway through our allotted time. So next up is Condo Review Board. Condo Review Board enforces the provisions of the condominium conversion ordinance by granting or denying condo conversion permits. This one is I think if I'm using the words right, it is an adjudicatory body where their decision stands alone. When I had a recent personal experience with this, where that body voted, and then I got a piece of paper, and nobody else was consulted after that. 5 members plus one alternate, again with this structure that's spelled out of 2 homeowners, 2 tenants, and 1 person who's either elderly, disabled, or lower moderate income. They're a 3-year term, they meet monthly, and they get staff support from housing. I recall that Councillor Klingon mentioned that this one is a relatively recent addition since the condo review ordinance only came into existence a few years ago, and his inclination was to let it run to get more runway on it. As we have been doing, I will share the webpage, which describes the work. They have a housing policy coordinator. They have a list of members, and then they have all sorts of good information up top. My inclination is to recommend that we retain this. This looks like another one that it's doing a job that we decided under ordinance needs to be done. And if we do away with this, we will have to substantially rewrite that ordinance. Open to other conversation.
Those are more or less my thoughts as well. This is very entangled with the condo conversion ordinance as far as I can tell. And we have a lot of work in front of us. I don't think something that is of recent introduction by the city is the right place to be spending our time and energy.
Yeah, I have opinions on the broader way we're handling condos, but given that we're doing it this way, this board is an essential part of it. And I can almost hear our staff liaison in my head describing the scope of the committee to me here. Derek, you raised your hand again?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just it occurs to me, I'm just seeing it now, that one of our members of the public has a hand raised. I don't know how long it's been up.
I actually cannot see that, so thank you for saying that.
In the participants tab, I hope you see this. In the participants, there's an attendees column. Will you click over to it?
Participants. Oh, there we are. Yes, I do. All right, attendees. I see Holly Simeone has her hand up. You are welcome to chime in.
I apologize. There wasn't a good spot to interrupt. Thank you, Derek, for seeing my hand. And no worries, Chris. I know how hard it is to run the meeting and to see those things when they pop up. I just was curious on the agenda under number 4. There is several commissions, including the Disability Commission, mentioned as unfinished business. And when I looked at the July agenda, I think it's listed there as to be considered for combining. And I'm curious if that's going to be taken up tonight, and if there's any discussion with the public or input from the members on combining those 4 commissions, 5 commissions actually.
Yeah, so we don't have the minutes from the last meeting yet. I will attempt to summarize, and I ask the other members who were there to keep me honest on this. We made a broad distinction of bodies that directly advise a specific city department or function, and those that are more generally advisable and brought together by identity or affinity or for some purpose that is not directly within some city department. And in an effort to start the conversation and force us to get our thoughts in order about how to make a recommendation on that, I put these on the agenda last time with the idea that perhaps if they are, these bodies are also from my conversations with a lot of people, this is where a lot of the stress is for the bodies that have had challenges in even maintaining quorum and in being felt as effective. And so the question is, if we're spreading effort across 6, would it be possible to do a really good job with 1? and somehow retain, like, is that even a reasonable thing to think? I'm personally not ready. I don't feel like the conversations have come together to the point where I have a really clear proposal on how to proceed there. And I did ask the committee members at the beginning of this meeting, and nobody stepped up and said, yes, I absolutely want to talk about that today. So I think that what probably happens is that discussion of those remains on the agenda so that in future meetings, we can force ourselves to come to some sort of a coherent recommendation and continue gathering information as it comes up. But yeah, I don't expect us to take any kind of a vote on those this evening.
Okay, I also noticed there's some public comment on the agenda, but it wasn't attached to the meeting, what those records were.
Yes, those we got two letters that were forwarded as PDFs to the committee, and those have not made their way to the city website yet.
Okay, no worries. I can look for them later on. I understand.
And I'm happy to also, I will be aware when they pop up, and I can let you know.
No worries, as long as they will land there. Okay, thank you so much. Pardon the interruption.
No worries. Thank you for asking. Totally good question. We had a whole section on the, and I just skipped it.
I look to just jump in. I think we're very lucky to have Elise and Holly here in their respective roles on both the Human Rights and the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. And I do want to hear from them on this issue if they have things that they want to add to the conversation. So I would be open, if you would entertain it, Mr. Chair, to going back to that item just as a listening session, if that's their intention. I will also share my opinion that written comment is going to be easier for us to go back to and continue to reread, redigest, and consider as we get additional information. So if you do feel like you have an appetite for it and can send written comment, I think that will be more powerful and more enduring and durable as our work continues. And I've solicited all sorts of hands, apparently, so I apologize. Stirring the pot.
No, this is great. Courtney, I saw yours first.
Thank you. No, you did not stir the pot with me. I have a hard stop at 7. I can possibly stay on to like 7:05, but I do have another meeting to hop on. And I did not want that to affect quorum at all.
Okay, let me suggest this then, because 7 is coming right up. It seems like we're aligned and we're still on the condo review board, and I'm going to pop back to that other conversation in a sec. Let's wrap up condo review. I didn't hear anybody speak up to recommend anything other than retaining it. So I would move that we recommend retention on condo review board.
Now second.
Excellent. Brenna Broderick.
Yes.
Courtney Henderson.
Yes.
Derek Rice.
Yes.
Jesse Kling is absent, and I say yes, so we're recommending that we retain that. All right. Let us pop back to item 4. And I am also, I should have twigged to that, but I was locked in on my little plan and sharing my screen. I apologize. That's a great idea from Derek. I am very curious to hear thoughts about, in particular, human rights and persons with disabilities in the context of the scope of this committee, which is to recommend retention, dissolution, or being merged, or creating a new committee, and to comment on the ability of the city to seat people on those committees. And I think that we have space to talk more generally about sort of standardization. But what I want to avoid is creating a forum for either criticizing particular staff members or for having a policy discussion that fundamentally the mayor would have to decide on. It's just way outside of the scope of what this committee can directly impact. With that, I have lost the participant window. If somebody would like to tell me who has a hand up, I will enter. They can go ahead and talk.
We have
Elise has a hand up.
Elise.
Okay, Elise, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you. I think instead of speaking it, which if I spoke it, I might be a little bit emotional, but I think I would rather submit a written response to that, with all the due respect and thoughtfulness I'll put into it. So I'll submit a public comment. Just let me know where I'm supposed to send that. Is that through the clerk's office?
It would be through Brendan Salisbury's email directly.
Sorry, to whom again? I apologize. I lost volume.
It's Brendan Salisbury in the clerk's office. He is handling all comments related to the multiple member body review.
Yeah, and it's
Thank you.
in the agenda. You can go ahead if you
Oh,
choose. You can also CC me and Derek. Um, and the intent there was that public comment that goes to Mr. Salisbury will wind up as a PDF attached to the meeting minutes. And if you would prefer to just let the chair and the co-chair know something, that's why our emails are there as well. We deliberately kept that sub-quorum in case people wanted to not have their comments published permanently on the website.
those are good options. Thank you very much. I'll be submitting my written response, and which way I'll go with it, I don't know yet, but thanks for those options. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just to say, I am also happy to take time to speak on the phone or to meet someplace. I want to be as well informed as we possibly can.
Excellent. That's great too. Maybe I'll take all those options. Thank you.
All right.
And Mr. Holly's hand is back up, it seems
All
as
right.
well.
Ali Simeone.
I think Clerk Anderson is still working on unmuting.
Excuse me.
I don't think I can unmute Holly directly. Actually, Courtney, if you're departing, do you need to make one of us give one of us control of over the meeting?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, what was that?
If you're departing, do you need to make one of us the presenter?
I do, but I'm trying to think of the best way to do that just because the clerk's office has to have ownership of the meeting. So, I mean, I can try my best to stay on a little bit longer. But worst case scenario, I will have to make one of you all host.
Okay. Yeah, and if technical constraints demand that we close out early, that's just what we have to do. Could we unmute Holly, please?
There we go. Thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity as well as you sharing what is appropriate to be said and how this group, what your task is at hand. I just wanted to point out that it's very interesting watching your process and having you look at different things like whether or not there are minutes, what the agendas look like, seeing the complexities in staffing for all of these bodies, which you can totally understand. However, specifically for the Disability Commission, we are created by a state statute, and that statute gives us, if you look at the specific statute, not at our webpage, you will see there are very different things that we're tasked with doing. So I hope that is where you look at what our role is, and not necessarily what it's been interpreted as. We also have a second statute that's been accepted, which is how we receive our funding. So I think that might be something that you also should be looking at because that gives us the ability to take the funds collected from handicap parking fines, and we are then, by the commission's vote, we then are able to use those funds to improve the lives of people with disabilities who live in the city or who come and visit the city even. And that's a very important piece of the work that we do also. We are also responsible for reviewing all of the access board requests, all the variances. And so I hope again that those pieces pull through. And this is unfortunately the first time I've read through all of the documents and your tasks, so that's on me. But I did see where there was going to be surveys sent to the members. And being a chair of a commission, I would hope that there would have already seen something that we could give some feedback on. Again, constructive feedback. Specifically, you know, a point of information being the ability to fill the seats. That has only been limited by others, not by a lack of people willing to take on the role in our specific commission. So there are multiple factors, I'm sure, in all of the committees. I do see crossover when you're looking at aging persons. I'm not sure if the Council for Aging Persons is staffed or is running, but the work that the Women's Commission does is very different than the work that the Disability Commission does. And the Human Rights Commission absolutely involves the people with disabilities, but the work is different. It is, and those three are vital and separate for their own reasons. That's not to say anything negative about urban design because I'm not mentioning them or fair housing, but I just would like to share my personal thoughts on those three commissions.
Thank you. That's actually incredibly valuable, especially the point about the skew between the state law and the website and your experience as the chair. I think that's really good to know. Derek. So, sorry, Holly, I was responding to you, so you should have a chance to talk first.
No, I would love to hear if Derek had any questions or comments as well.
Yeah, some comments which are not directed only at Holly, but are for the group. One of the things that we have discussed in past meetings was an acknowledgement of the limitations of the work that we can do as a body.
Mhm.
And I think our earlier sort of aspirations, we've had to scope down pretty dramatically from that. It's not something that we discuss in every meeting, so it's probably not immediately visible to folks who might be jumping in for one meeting. But the idea of a questionnaire going out to commissioners was something that I was excited about and provided feedback about some additional questions on things that I was curious about hearing from commissioners on. But ultimately, due to limitations inclusive of limitations in staff support, that has been deemed to be more work than we can take on. So there will not, to my knowledge, unless we change our plan, be a questionnaire sent out to commissioners. I can speak for myself that I'm doing what I can to reach out to people to hear from them. I've seen similar from Chris, and I know that everyone on this body is like working hard to try to hear from people, but I certainly do have some concerns that in the end our report will be less well informed than I wish it would have been. And when we talk about limitations on the scope of our work, those limitations come from two places. One is the scope of our work is defined by the ordinance and our interpretation of it, and the other is practical limitations. I think, there are very variations of opinion on both those points throughout this body, members of this body. Certainly anything that is an administrative choice is an administrative choice that exists in the space outside of what is legislatively defined. so I can reframe all of those discussions as a legislative discussion. And if it were urgent enough to the community and impactful enough to the community, I would do that. If I felt like we could do hard work here in this group to make a recommendation that would change the state of things, I would do that. So I would love to hear more from you about what you think those things are and give me the evidence I need to convince others that that's worth us taking up and trying to do. Because we are facing just a tremendous amount of headwinds in the work we're trying to do. And I do not fault anyone for trying to keep things really tight and narrow. But yeah, I guess to conclude, I am very sorry for those limitations as the circumstances we find ourselves in. Um, and briefly, I certainly think that when we come to our point in producing a report that includes an assessment of the functions and relevancies of the city's current multi-member bodies, to me, an assessment of the function means what is it that they do in comparison to what is it that we think they're supposed to be doing? What are the powers that are granted to them? What are the responsibilities that they have? Not merely, oh, they're not effective, so we should dissolve them, but what is the gap? So 100% looking at like what are the powers that are actually granted, and if they're falling short, I don't think it's about setting blame. It's about acknowledging and realizing that and seeing if there's something we can suggest that might help close the gap. Thank you.
I've seen Elise's hand for a while. Brenna, would it be okay if she went first? Thank you.
Can I be heard? Oh, here.
Yeah.
Excellent. Like I said, I'm going to put forward a written statement, but just to inform your committee that the Human Rights Commission has released and published our annual human rights report 2025 to 2026. It will be in circulation in the library come September. And it's been published in 2 publications and spread widely. And I agree with Holly that a lot of our work does overlap in terms of issues, but we are very distinct in what we do. And I can only speak for my commission that I co-chair. It is hard work. It is good work. And we have rebuilt something that was essentially started off as rubble and building it up to something we're very, very close to functioning optimally. We have put out an article about something that happened in the city. I can't discuss it. We have worked really hard on the annual report, have worked very hard on our subcommittees. So I would really hate to see that. Not hate, I would be really sad to see that go away because human rights is fundamental to people's lives, and people want to know if they feel heard or not. So I do encourage respectfully that this committee please read the human rights report that we put out. If you would like me to send you a copy, I will. We've done tremendous outreach regarding it, and I hope you will find that informative about what we do and what we are. I thank you for allowing me to say that.
Thank you. And I would say personally, whatever channel you decide to communicate, I would personally love to hear what changed that allowed you to produce that report. But wherever you think it's appropriate to say it, because I've been observing city matters for a bunch of years, and I have wanted something like this report for a very long time, and I don't have a lot of visibility into what changed.
A lot of hard work and grit, I will tell you that. A lot of hard work and grit, and sometimes for me, tears. Thank
Thank you. Brenna.
Thank you, Chris. I'll just start by saying I was only on, I like believe, part of our last meeting when this was on the agenda. If I'm thinking of the correct meeting, I had to leave after about an hour, so I was not part of the latter part of the meeting, which I believe this discussion item was part of, was the true meat of the discussion. Um, that being said, I just want to say that from my understanding of this agenda item and conversations of potential mergings, like in no way has that been proposed as a reflection of the efficacy or the impact of a board. This is in no way like a punitive measure of like this body has not been effective, so let's merge them with someone else. I really want that to be clear. In addition to my work with this board, I work very closely with SCPD and HRC, which are really, really effective bodies that are doing important work. I just want to make sure that that is set on the record, because I think that I don't want there to be a misunderstanding that any sort of conversation about merging bodies is a perception of a body not being effective. I have not gotten the impression from any member of this body, the multi-member review body, that that's what is driving this conversation at all. So Holly and Elise, please just know that this agenda item is not from any perception that these bodies are lacking impact or efficacy. Really what we're looking at is like the structure of bodies and where there is overlap. Like I know that there was a conversation at one point, hasn't a conversation around like the different bodies within mobility, or today we're talking about the different bodies within PSEF. Not necessarily that one or the other objective is less valuable, but would it be more effective just structurally to be like bringing some under the same umbrella to continue their work from like a different municipal structure. So that's really the origin of where this agenda item came from. Chris, please feel free to correct me if I'm off base here, but I don't want this to be perceived as like some sort of assessment of the efficacy of our bodies, that those that are effective we're keeping and those that are not effective we're dissolving. That's absolutely like not at all the origin of this discussion. It's really just looking at like the structure of how our boards are sitting in relation to each other.
Yeah, 100%. Echoing basically everything that Brenna and Derek and Elise said. My understanding of what this body is doing, we started in our very first meeting with a set of, I think, 6 committees that had not met in more than a decade, and that were still on the books in the Code of Ordinances, and that I have talked to more than one person who said, your job was just to clean those up. You're done. Congratulations. You know, I think we could do more, right? And I think we should dig in on some of these dustier ones that were defined in kind of antique language from the 20s and the 60s. And then the idea of merging was deliberately to force conversation and not let us be complacent. That came from me. And it came with the observation that some of these committees and commissions are very naturally advising a particular staff function. And those are the ones where who should staff the committee and how informed they are about the work of the committee and where the recommendations go. It just is, it's a short path organically, right? And for functions where the city does not have a department that supports it, and that's a bigger conversation, right? We don't have a department of persons with to serve persons with disabilities, right? It's spread across the whole city. We don't have a department of human rights. It's kind of spread across. And in that case, some staffer has to work with them, and it's several staffers, and there's more communication, and there's more. And the question before this committee is there a sensible recommendation we can make that would help the city be more effective in serving these needs and leveraging the incredible amount of volunteerism and civic energy that we see. Because the worst thing we can possibly do is let people beat their heads against a wall and have it just dissipate. Like that's just a crime. So that was the intent of the conversation around combination, exactly as both Derek and Brenna said. No review on efficacy, certainly never a comment on the quality or the spirit of the work that was done. Anything else on those? And also just to say the I'll work with Brendan on this, that the body's pending recommendation is rapidly going to become an unwieldy thing. And so we'll find a way to put that more clearly on the agendas in the future. All right, would it be, and I think that Courtney has probably turned her attention elsewhere, but left the session running.
Here, Mr.
So,
Chair.
all right. Are Derek and Brenna, are you comfortable proceeding with the bottom of the agenda, or should we not try to do that tonight? Go ahead, Brenna.
I'm comfortable with proceeding. I think that we've been keeping it around 2 hours, and I feel confident we could do with the remaining of the agenda in the next 40 minutes.
Yeah, I do as well.
I'm also comfortable proceeding. I might be more inclined to hesitate on decision making down to 3 members than I would be before, but yeah, let's at least have the conversation.
All right, so let's talk about historic preservation. Historic preservation is one of the ones where we made it up by ordinance. It enforces the Historic District Ordinance and the Demolition Review Ordinance. It is ordinance only, no mass state law. There are 7 members and 7 alternates. This is 1 alternate per seat. That's unique in my explorations of these things. Again, we have this structure where we have a specific set of interests represented: the historical society, an architect, a real estate broker, a city planner, an attorney, and 2 citizens. In terms of 3 years, they meet twice a month, and they are staffed out of OSPCD. And then they, shifting over to their web page, they, so far as I know, are fully staffed. They don't even have they're there, their commission. And they hide their members under a chevron because our website it contains multitudes. There are many ways to do things. But we have, according to the website at least, actually, Brenna, you're well positioned to know this. Are these citizen members still vacant?
I believe so. I can confirm that tomorrow. I've joined this meeting from my personal laptop, so I don't have that list in front of me, but I can check tomorrow.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
I
know.
will add, Chris, we have not filled any seats in my time with the administration.
Okay.
So the last 7 months, I have not submitted any names.
Okay. That's at odds that's at odds with some things I've seen at city council where members of committees and commissions have been approved for those. Maybe those were just in flight previously.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. We have submitted plenty of names for appointment. I mean, in my time with the administration, I have not submitted names for appointment to these 2 seats.
Okay.
We have not worked with the liaison for this body to fill these seats due to threat of making quorum or not being able to do business. So we have not heard from the commission or from the liaison that there is a need to fill these seats imminently. But yes, to be on record, you are correct. We have filled many seats in other board on other.
Okay. I have not attended any meetings of this body, but I know that when they meet, they make decisions, and those decisions are binding within the context of historical preservation and our demolition review ordinance. So they have adjudicatory power. So we run up against the thing that if we want our ordinances to work as our ordinances are written, this body kind of needs to exist. I will say for my part, this is the first one I think that we're talking about where I think, expressing my personal opinion, that this body would benefit from the advice of some of the other bodies in a way that is not listed out in the membership here, that we have architects and real estate brokers and historians, and there are other interests in the city that might guide accelerating or slowing. In this case, it's almost exclusively slowing and preserving the architecture that's presently there. So I don't know if we'll have a coherent enough statement on that to make the report, but this is one where it just struck me that it influences the built environment, and it influences the ability to make changes to some of our older and presumably less accessible buildings that might be well informed by somebody who has challenges with mobility, for example. That said, I personally don't see any way that we could do away with this without substantially redoing the way our zoning works. And so my inclination is we could either decide to ask for more information on it, or we could just recommend to retain. I'm happy either way. Incrementally happier to recommend that we retain since we're piling up stuff that we need to do research on.
Yeah, Chris, I would be comfortable recommending to retain. I don't see one of the other enumerated options as practical from my perspective. Um I under I suspect I am not alone in really sometimes scratching my head at like how different some of these bodies are structured than others, and not seeing a clear explanation in the differences from the bodies otherwise that informs that. Um, I recognize our list of enumerated recommendations does not include recommendations to change this format, but we can certainly opine upon it in our assessment of the body's functioning and our broad survey of these different bodies. And I would be inclined at some point to have that conversation. I think this body is an interesting case. Just as many alternates as real. I suppose any of them could have arbitrary number of alternates if they're not voting. They're just sort of non-member participants in some way. The specificity of the representation, there's a lot of interesting choices here. And there are different and differently interesting choices elsewhere, and I'm not sure how that impacts the many other parts of these bodies functioning that we are tasked with assessing.
Yeah, Brenna.
Yes, I was going to ask a point of clarification, but Derek answered my question. Yeah, I echo this question. I think that I think this is like maybe a question for a liaison, and I'm not like recommending another liaison like presentation. Perhaps this is something like we invite the liaison for some of these to join just for like some opportunity for questions. Like a question that I may have is, in this one in particular, the specificity of the seats that like the vocational and professional requirements behind them. I know just anecdotally that can make appointing these seats very difficult because you have to find um, people of these particular professions who are interested in serving in this volunteer capacity. And so I would be, before recommending any sort of like revision, I would be curious to hear from liaison or from the department if that has been a barrier in the past to filling the seats, and if so, perhaps it can be in our recommendations to like reconsider some of the professional requirements, um, or loosen them so that there's like, four of the seats have professional requirements, and then the remaining three have like recommendations that can be a little bit more flexible, just to allow a more streamlined pathway towards filling seats. I know that some bodies, it's really easy to get a lot of interest. In some bodies, like you're lucky if you get two candidates for one seat. And so I would be really curious to learn more about like if this has hindered the appointment process in the past, and if we might make a recommendation just to like reconsider the specificity. I know I don't think that like the time ahead will allow us something more like to go deeper into this than just to like make a recommendation that this body, and then I think there's a couple of others that are escaping me right now that have like some really, really specific professional requirements. And in some cases, there's probably an argument that actually like it was written for a reason, and we do need those professional expertise, that particular professional expertise. But I think perhaps like we can make a recommendation in the cases the that the appointment requirements do hinder the process of keeping these seats filled, that we reconsider and revisit those. So I'll just
Yeah, but before calling on Derek, I have experience with the Urban Forestry Committee where we have some vocational requirements both to have a plant scientist and somebody who works in urban arboriculture. And in both cases, it was super hard to fill those because people are concerned about the appearance of a conflict of interest, even on a non-adjudicatory body that does nothing but advise on planting standards. We went through a series of local arborists whose employers became uncomfortable with them being on the committee. And it was a real argument in that case against strict term limits because it was so hard to find the person, and we needed them to ground our conversations. Also, I would note this ordinance was written in 1963, amended in 1990, and at that time they didn't do away with the dusty chairman and vice chairman, which is kind of old language. But yeah, it's sort of a bigger question of restructuring this whole thing. Like, I don't know what to do with it other than that. Derek.
You've made the point that was on my mind, and noting that this was 1963. I think there's certainly, if it's not broken, there's no need to fix it mentality. But there's also with anything that is aging that much, I would be very surprised if we look at it hard and go, yeah, no, that's what we want. So I think a possible meta recommendation that we could make in our report is, by laying out a concise but comprehensive communication of like, these are the different types of bodies, I think there are different facets, like different ways of, okay, so these are advisory or working bodies, and working bodies with like binding powers, and working bodies with formal but non-binding powers, and like, these different ways of looking at these things, and then also noting what differences we see across these things, such as composition. Like, okay, well, amongst advisory bodies, we see a wild amount of variation, or there's a very clear cluster and there are outliers, right? I think even us coming to that understanding is work. And I think in the moment I tend to agree with Brenna that it would probably be hard for us to make a concrete recommendation, but I think it would be incredibly valuable to surface that within our report, because I think that is something that would very much inform the conversation between our legislators and our executive about how we want to move forward. So yeah, I'm feeling excited about that.
I completely agree that it's fun to be at the boundary of kind of what we can do. I'm coming back to necessity, like what's the problem we're trying to solve? And I'm reading this statement of purpose, and this was clearly written pieces resonate and other pieces are just missing. The first truly nasty the first really complicated piece of legislature that I stared at when I started watching city council was extending the historic preservation or the demolition review moratorium from 1 year to 2 years, and whether that was a useful or an effective thing. And I wondered at the time what we were trying to do with it. Brenna.
I think it may be valuable as we're doing this sort of like individual look at a lot of these bodies to note which are the ones that we're sort of scratching our heads and being like, do you really need, a I can't even remember what the professions were, but like a plant scientist, or do you really need a an art historian or a historical conservationist? Like all of these particularities that are built into the requirements. I think it would be useful if we kind of make note. And then I'm really, really of the religion of if it can be an email instead of a meeting, maybe leaning in that inclination, but reaching out to the liaisons who represent these respective boards to say like, this came up in our conversation. If you have any insight, has this these requirements to the composition, has this hindered appointment processes in the past? Like, how has this affected the experience of the board administratively, but also the experience of the commissioners? And if they are interested in coming and speaking before us, I don't think that it needs to be a whole presentation, but drilling down into this particular question of like, is this, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Is this something that could use fixing? I think it would be really useful to get like a public comment from liaisons on this particular topic in the certain in the bodies that we come across this. So maybe we can kind of be keeping note of those bodies that like historical preservation, potentially like urban forestry, if that, because I know that there's some vocational requirements to the composition there. And then we can ask the liaisons to weigh in on that particular matter, with a public comment of like, has this hindered the appointment process, and that can kind of guide the recommendation that we give that says, maybe we reconsider these particular commissions.
Yeah, I'm looking at this language and I'm wondering if this one was from the 60s. Like, I know the Somerville Historical Society still exists. I don't know about the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities. Yeah, that recommendation to look, and that can be a really clear recommendation actually to the council, to look at this language and ask, is this the right makeup? And totally agree, that should be informed by the liaison. I think I would like to recommend to keep this in a parking lot in the optimistically that we will have time in the fall to go deep on some of these deeper questions, but I think it's very unlikely that we're going to recommend to dissolve this. So I would move that we recommend that we retain the Historic Preservation Commission, and that's the motion. Derek Rice says thumbs up from Derek.
Yeah,
Brenna.
thumbs up was my second and is a yes. I'll be verbal. Go ahead.
Brenna?
Yes.
Cool. 3 yes, 2 absent, recommended, with a strong asterisk that I do want to come back and talk more about.
Mr. Chair, I'm also a yes on that one. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought that you were. I apologize. I should have called your name. 4 yes, 1 absent. All right. Next up is memorialization. Memorialization is kind of a fun one. It names public buildings, spaces, and streets, and defines policy and procedure around the installation of memorial benches, artwork, and similar objects. It is ordinance only. It is a 7-person committee with representation from the city council, the school committee, the veterans committee, the historic committee, and I guess there would be 3 community members. Term is 2 years. Meetings seem to be infrequent. but I have seen several instances in city council meetings where we have named various things and everybody has effusively praised the detailed work of this committee. Um, I will share the website. My inclination is that it's doing a thing that we need done, and it seems to be doing it well. Although there are a pair of vacancies. But anyway, my experience with this one is that there's a particular function that needs to be informed by some detailed conversation, and I feel like in this case, the specific representation from veterans and historic committee and the council and the school committee feels actually, as I say that, are there other constituencies who ought to be represented in that? It's a smidge out of scope, but it's one where, yeah, that conversation about asking the council to consider, are these the constituencies who ought to be consulted on memorializing things, is a question. Other thoughts on memorialization?
Chris, if I'm curious if you would be able to put back on your screen from your working document those 5 pillars of
Sure. And while I'm here, I was scrolling around 2020 was when we did this one. So it's
oh,
very,
interesting.
I wonder if I'm incorrect about that.
My notes say 2020 as well.
Okay.
So,
But
we might be similarly wrong, but I don't know.
and recall that the pillars are not given to us from on high. These are just something that I found super useful.
No, absolutely. The reason I ask is because it takes a little squinting with the necessity. I'm gonna be very clear. I'm gonna go ahead and like share my that's what we're always doing, but I'm sharing my opinion. Is there a specific problem that needs to be solved? It's like I think yes. It's like these things need to be given a name, and how do we make the naming of them not a political action? We need some way to solve that. We need those names to be apolitical. Ex I already dislike that I labeled it apolitical because it aren't we all often naming things after people who have done great political deeds to further our community. Um, but I think the gist of what I'm trying to get across is probably understood. They should not be chips that are used for individual gain in politics, the naming of things. Um, so I do think it is. I see it. Well, at first I'm like, do we really need a committee of people to just decide what a name is going to be on a street corner? I actually, I'm feeling like, yeah, no, we probably should because that'll quickly become co-opted for personal gain. Otherwise, and that's not a comment on any sitting member of our government. It's just my take on government. Um, so if we can do this through community members and it's not a huge headache for us to maintain it, and they're doing a good job, that's great. I would probably be sad to recommend dissolving it just to push the number of bodies down if this body isn't costly. That said, I know just keeping up with appointments is in and of itself costly. If there are other creative solutions that make sure that the naming of things aren't political chips used by sitting politicians, then maybe we can recommend something else. But just sort of sharing off the cuff thoughts on the necessity of this. Thanks.
Brenna.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Derek was saying. And I'll just add that I anecdotally I work closely with the person who's the liaison to this committee, and in my like working with boards and commissions, I've been talking with him, it's Jesse Moose, about like his work in the memorialization committee, and he was sort of like, yeah, like we meet when we need to, but we haven't like we don't work when we don't need to, when there isn't something to be named. And so I think just as far as like city resources go and like, is this a heavy lift? My impression, and I'm just again like going off anecdotally like from conversations and just like my perception from working within City Hall, My perception is that this is not a committee that requires a heavy lift, and so may not require like a really close inspection of like the kind of resources to efficacy ratio that we've not resources to efficacy, but the like resources to necessity ratio that we've been sort of parsing out in our conversations. I I don't believe this group to be like a drain on city resources or time. So I'll just kind of drop that in. And I also, yeah, okay, I'll stop there.
Go ahead, Derek. You are muted, my friend.
Thank you. I also note that the composition of this body, many of the seats are provided as representatives or designees from other bodies, which means that the city doesn't need to keep replacing empty seats at nearly as much. The administration doesn't need to keep replacing empty seats nearly as much. Sorry, I think the composition is mayor or their designee, so that's just like almost certainly city staffer, right? Representative of city council or designee, representative of school committee or designee, representative of veterans commission or designee, historical society as designated by the board of the society, and then 2 seats from the public. So even though there are 7 members, there's only 2 sort of seats that the city needs to keep appointed. It's just, as we ideate on the issue that like one of the challenges is keeping up with appointments. This is an interesting approach.
Yeah, it cuts both ways. I most of the time absolutely love the idea of having a deep bench of civically engaged people of all backgrounds that we then deploy into these various questions. And then sometimes I think of how hard it is to get people to engage at all and raising the activation energy that you know that if you're going to join one of these committees, you're going to be pressed into service on more of them. But yeah, I agree with the point that it does make it easier to solicit membership if you can go to the Veterans Commission and say, we need a person to go serve on memorialization, who's up? That's a lot easier than like taking out an ad in the paper and starting from nothing. I had some other thought on this one. Oh, it was that on those 5 pillars, the necessity is the first question. I think you hit it on the head that it is wise to let these people go off and speak. Nobody's gunning for reelection and is going to name something for whatever reason. Not that anybody in our city would, but politicians do things like that. And then it comes all the way down to equity at the bottom. And I think that having a thoughtful committee makes our naming more equitable in a way that would be hard to accomplish otherwise. So I would go ahead and move that we recommend retaining the memorialization committee.
Yeah, I second that.
Cool. All right. Derek Rice.
Yes.
Brendan Broderick.
Yes.
Courtney Henderson from your other meeting. Courtney Henderson. I say yes. I'll take it with 3 and 2 absent, pending if Courtney wants to jump in and say yes at some later time. So we have one last one on the agenda. Thank you for working so diligently through this with me. I really appreciate it. And it is my personal favorite committee out of all of them because I served on it for 5 years, the Urban Forestry Committee. I have wild biases about this one. I think it's great. The committee advises on the management and maintenance of trees and shrubs on public grounds and public ways. That's its job. It has produced, I'll continue on. It's a relatively recent ordinance passed in 2018, seated in 2019. It has two members of staff who serve on it ex officio. There's the tree warden out of DPW who is now within grounds, who is the person tasked with the tree crew who go around with chainsaws and loppers and stuff. And then there's the senior landscape planner out of PSUF who plans the planting and plans species and negotiates purchases of trees. Seven adult members of the public, two high school aged residents, which is unique in the committees we've discussed so far. I am happy to speak in wild, enthusiastic support of having youth membership of committees, where particularly the ones that are not adjudicatory. The kids have so many fantastic ideas and so much context and so much surface area against the city. It's awesome. It's also basically impossible to keep them as members because they graduate and they go. We didn't specify terms in there. They meet monthly and have produced a great number of things over the several years of their existence that including supporting the Somerville urban forestry strategy document. We pioneered this idea of having associate members, where this was something that we had a couple of members of the community who kept showing up. We didn't have any empty seats. And so I was chair at the time, and we just decided to see if we could name associate members, and nobody told us we couldn't. We got away with it. So now that's the thing that committee does. I like I say, I'm wildly biased on this one, but I think it's a very effective committee. It's got a bunch of stuff I'm happy to talk about, but I think we should retain it. I'm sorry, that's my thumb on the scale there.
I'm trying to go through my list of bodies. Um, is there a, a body related to like parks and public space? Other bodies similar to that?
There used to be, it was one of the defunct ones that we did away with.
Did we make that recommendation? The recreation and something?
Yeah, it was
Recreation and youth.
recreation and youth went away. Um,
So
Wait,
we
sorry,
made
wasn't
that
there?
preliminary recommendation. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Brandon.
Sorry, I thought that there was a. I may be misremembering. Um, actually, I'm thinking of a different one. I thought that there was like a municipal something commission that was separate from recreation and youth.
Athletic facilities.
Thank you. Okay,
And we
never mind.
just, in conversation, we said the municipal athletics, can't speak, and recreation and youth in large part became a city department. But then, yeah, we don't really have, and this was, it is not unreasonable, and I think I foreshadowed this in the Conservation Commission. Um, Urban forestry advises exactly the same department on very, very related topics as Conservation Commission. And we do not have another, I guess we also have the Climate Action Commission, which is different. But yeah, we don't really have a parks one. Were you going anywhere in particular with that, Derek?
Maybe I'm just trying to balance out your thumb on the scale. Let's just make sure we give everything the same fair shake that you gave PTAC and the bicycle committee. But I my honest take just aside, I think these are siblings. Not I don't feel like I have an appetite for seriously considering merging them right now, or at least not leading that conversation. Um, Conservation Commission certainly deals with, the immediately visible and tangible parts of our city landscape. but maybe the man-made parts. And urban forestry is the more nature-made parts. But certainly, I think the substance of their conversations and their deliberations are probably hugely different in most cases. Um, I think my read on PTAC and Bicycle Advisory Committee is that I think that's probably true of them as well, but that's not the agenda item we're talking about now. Yeah, I mean, I'm just to be clear. Sorry, I'm not being misread. Like, I'm supportive of the Urban Forestry Committee, right? And the my intense commitment to a principled approach here means that I just want to look at it the same way we're looking at others.
I I absolutely hear the and I'm beginning to share. I am aware that we are going to receive written comment from both PTAC and the Bicycle Committee. Um, I suspect arguing for their ongoing separateness, but I'm not sure. So they may appear on a later agenda again. But any other comments on UFC? Go ahead, Brenna.
Just that I believe where we left off with Concom was that none of us felt quite informed, or I'll just say myself, I didn't feel quite like informed enough about the breadth of their work, especially based off of like limited materials online to really engage in a deliberation. And so if we were to move forward with like inviting a member or the liaison or member of PSF or the liaison to come and speak a little bit more about the work of piece of Concom, I would love to pair that like conversation with the same thing um from I'm sorry, Urban First Forestry. I think if we're sort of examining them as sibling commissions, it would be good to hear from both liaisons a little bit about like their work. I think that would allow like sort of a compare and contrast and give us more information around which to make to at least deliberate. So I think that I mean I feel comfortable voting on this today, but I think that if there's more conversation to be had, especially around like how this differs from the Concom, then I would be really happy to hear from both liaisons. And it wouldn't
Okay.
need to be like a long presentation, even if it was just that they attended and like were present for us to ask them some questions or hear a little bit from them.
That sounds great. I love the idea of bringing in these sibling organizations to actually understand what the difference is. Like, what's the value of having two committees that advise the same department? Open to the idea that there's value there. I would just love to hear what it is. Okay, so let's then. I would like to make a recommendation that this be retained and be open to the idea that there's a sibling committee conversation downstream, just to keep us moving in the direction of having recommendations for every committee, so that we can call our shots on where we spend our time as we move into the fall. So I would move that we recommend retention for urban forestry. No second for Mr. Rice. Go ahead, Brenna.
I'll second.
Thank you. Um, Courtney Henderson,
Yes.
Derek Rice,
Yes.
Brenda Frederick,
Yes.
Jessica Klingon is absent. I say yes. That is the same 4-1 we've had throughout. Courtney, would you like to vote on the memorialization?
I would. I couldn't find my mute button fast enough. It was an obvious yes
All right.
for that one.
With that, we are at the bottom of our agenda. We are perfectly at 8 o'clock. Are there any other comments folks want to make before we call the roll on adjournment?
Yeah, could I just want to come back to the logistics question. So 2 weeks' time, you will not be with us. Is that correct, Mr.
That is
Chair? Okay. Um, well, just sort of forecast. Well, let me check my own calendar before I say anything. I have to walk back. Yeah. I feel comfortable facilitating our meeting, chairing our meeting. I'd be very open to, as you have been, I'd be very open to hearing proposed topics of agenda from the rest of the body. Just sort of probably forecasting a little bit absent some input. I might maybe stay in what feels like my wheelhouse of some of the more sort of not taking up specific bodies, but maybe taking up a framework of reasoning about types of bodies conversation. If people have an appetite for that, love to just sort of get a read on if people think that would be a useful conversation to have.
Right. So let's, as always, agenda items go to Brendan. He shops them back out. Yeah, we can plan to meet in my absence. And with that, let us at 8:02 call the roll on adjourning. Courtney Henderson, Brendan Broderick,
Yes.
Dear Price,
Yes.
and me. Yes, thank you all and good evening. Good productive session, folks.